Hey there, and welcome to True Scary Stories. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're from and what time you're watching. That helps YouTube know you love creepy stories, and it'll keep sending more your way.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. If you're new here, you've stumbled onto the right channel, because tonight we're going deep, really deep. Night shift. For most people, it's just a schedule, a way to make ends meet. You clock in when the rest of the world is asleep, you do your job, and you go home. Simple enough, right? But the people in tonight's stories, they'd tell you something different. They'd tell you that something changes when the sun goes down and the building empties out. Something you can't really explain until you felt it yourself. That particular silence, that particular darkness, that feeling, that creeping, bone-deep feeling that you are absolutely, completely not alone. These are 6 stories from people who worked the night shift, and not a single one of them will ever look at it the same way again. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Overnight Stalker. His name was Derek, 24 years old, fresh out of a bad breakup and desperately in need of steady income. He landed a job as an overnight stalker at a large grocery store in rural Ohio, the kind of town where not much happens, the kind of place where you'd assume the scariest thing at 2 in the morning is boredom. Derek was wrong about that. The store closed at 10. His shift started at 11. By the time he arrived, the parking lot was always empty, just his car and the 2 or 3 other cars belonging to his co-workers. The manager would let them in through the back loading dock, run through the night's task list, and then disappear into the office to do paperwork. For the first few weeks, nothing unusual happened. Derek would push his cart up and down the aisles, restocking shelves, listening to music through one earbud, counting down the hours. Tedious, sure, but manageable. It was a Tuesday night in late October when things changed. He was in aisle 7, the canned goods aisle, when he heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like knuckles on glass, except there was no glass nearby. Just metal shelving and concrete floors. He pulled out his earbud and listened. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the far end of the aisle. He grabbed his box cutter, more out of instinct than logic, and walked slowly toward the sound. Nothing. The aisle was empty. The tapping had stopped. He chalked it up to the building settling. Old buildings made noise. He went back to work. But then, around 2 in the morning, he was pushing his cart past the refrigerated dairy section when he saw something that stopped him cold. The glass doors of the dairy coolers, all 8 of them, running about 30 feet down the wall, were completely fogged up on the inside, which was weird because the coolers were always cold. The glass never fogged from the inside. It fogged on the outside when warm air hit it, but never from inside. He stood there looking at it for a long moment, and then, slowly, almost like it was being drawn by a finger, a shape began to trace itself through the fog on the other side of the glass. It was a hand, a human hand, moving slowly, deliberately, tracing its outline into the condensation from the inside of the refrigerated case. Derek took a step back. His brain immediately jumped to the rational explanation. Someone was trapped inside the cooler. It happened, right? Someone got locked in. He grabbed the handle of the nearest cooler door and pulled. Cold air rushed out. He looked inside. Nothing but milk and butter, all neatly stacked. He checked every single cooler door one by one. They were all empty of people. He went and found his coworker, a guy named Travis, and told him what he'd seen. Travis laughed and told him the store was old and weird things happened. But Derek noticed that Travis didn't actually come back to look at the dairy section with him. The rest of that night passed without incident, but Derek couldn't shake the image, that hand, moving slowly, deliberate, like it wanted him to see it. 2 nights later, he was working alone in the back of the store, near the stockroom, when he heard footsteps in the aisle just outside. Clear, distinct footsteps. The kind of sound a person makes when they're walking on tile in hard-soled shoes. He peeked around the corner. The aisle was empty. The footsteps stopped. He told himself it was nothing. He went back to his cart. And that's when his phone buzzed. An unknown number. Just 4 words. "I see you, Derek." He assumed it was a prank from one of his coworkers. He marched up to Travis and the other guy, a coworker named Ray, and asked which one of them had sent it. They both looked at him blankly. He showed them the text. Neither of them had his number in their phones. The manager, when he came out of the office, said it was probably someone who had his number from before, trying to mess with him. He shrugged it off and told Derek to get back to work. But there was one more thing, one thing that Derek never fully talked himself out of. At the end of that shift, as the crew was leaving through the loading dock, Derek glanced back through the small window in the door, the little rectangular window that let you see into the store from outside. Standing at the end of the center aisle, perfectly still, was a figure. Dark clothing. He couldn't make out a face, but it was standing there in the middle of the store at 5:30 in the morning in a store that had been locked since 10 o'clock the previous night. Derek grabbed the manager's arm and pointed. The manager looked through the window. The figure was gone. The manager searched the store, every aisle, the stockroom, the coolers, the bathrooms. He found nothing. No one. The alarm had never been triggered. The doors had all been locked from the inside. Derek quit the next day. He never went back for his last paycheck. To this day, he still gets the occasional text message from that unknown number. Always at night, always when he's alone. He never answers.
Story 2. The Security Guard at Millbrook Tower. Callum was 41 when he took the security job at Millbrook Tower, a 14-story office building in the Midwest that had seen better days. Half the floors were vacant. The company that had originally built it had gone bankrupt, and the new owners were slowly trying to lease it back out, floor by floor. In the meantime, Callum's job was simple. Patrol the building once an hour, check that the doors were locked, sign the log, repeat. The building had 2 elevators and 1 stairwell. At night, the lobby lights were kept on low, and everything above the 3rd floor was dark unless Callum hit the switches manually as he did his rounds. He'd been doing the job for about 6 weeks when he first noticed the elevator. He was sitting at the lobby desk, watching the monitors, when he noticed that the elevator on the left, elevator A, was in motion. The display above the door was cycling through floors. 5, 6, 7. It stopped at 8. Callum frowned. He hadn't called the elevator. Nobody should be in the building. He called his supervisor, who told him it was probably a glitch. Old elevators did that sometimes, moved on their own, triggered by electrical surges or failing components. His supervisor told him to go up and check floor 8 and report back. Callum took elevator B up to 8. He stepped into a long, dark hallway. He hit the light switch. Half the fluorescent lights flickered to life. The other half stayed dark, making the hallway look striped with shadow. He walked the floor slowly. Empty office spaces, dusty carpet, cubicle dividers still standing from whoever had last occupied the floor, some of them still with faded papers pinned to them. The place felt like the Marie Celeste, like everyone had just stood up and walked away midday. He didn't find anything. He took elevator B back down, logged it as a mechanical issue, and went back to his desk. But it happened again the following night, and the night after that. Always elevator A, always stopping at floor 8. Callum started to develop a ritual around it. See the elevator move, go up and check, find nothing, come back down. It became almost routine, until the night he found the chair. He'd been on the job about 2 months when he went up to floor 8 for what felt like the 20th time. He walked the hallway, hit the lights, did his sweep. In the middle of the hallway, facing the elevator doors, was a single office chair, black, wheeled, the kind you'd find at any desk. It had not been there the night before. Callum was certain of that because he'd been up to this floor enough times to know exactly what was and wasn't supposed to be here. He stood in the hallway staring at that chair for a long time. He called his supervisor again. His supervisor said it was probably maintenance workers who'd been up during the day and left equipment behind. Completely reasonable. Callum logged it and went back to his desk. When he came back up an hour later during his regular patrol, the chair had been moved. It was now facing the window at the far end of the hall, still in the middle of the corridor, but rotated a full 180 degrees. He was alone in the building. He had not left the lobby in the intervening hour. Nobody else had come in. The entrance log was clear, and the cameras would have caught anyone entering. Callum stood very still for a very long time. He told me he felt a kind of fear in that moment that was different from ordinary fear. Not the sharp adrenaline spike of sudden danger, more like a slow, cold understanding. The feeling you get when you realize something is very wrong and you have no framework to explain it. He went back downstairs. He sat at his desk for the remaining 4 hours of his shift without doing another patrol. He stared at the monitors. Elevator A did not move again that night. But here's the part that got to me when he told me this story, the part that he saved for last, almost like he wasn't sure he wanted to say it. He said that on one of the monitors, the one covering the lobby camera cast, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Up near the ceiling in the corner of the lobby where the camera had a blind spot, there were scratches in the drywall, like something had been dragged across it repeatedly over a long period of time. The scratches were too high up to have been made by a person standing on the floor. They were about 12 feet up. Callum finished out his contract at Millbrook Tower, but he requested a partner for his shifts. Management denied it. He refused to do his hourly patrols above the 3rd floor ever again. He logged every patrol as completed regardless. He told me he's pretty sure his supervisor knew something was wrong with that building. He's pretty sure everyone knew. He's just not sure exactly what it was.
Story 3. The Nurse on Floor 4. This one comes from a woman named Brianna, a registered nurse who worked the overnight shift at a small regional hospital in the southeast. She'd been a nurse for 9 years, was completely level-headed, not prone to exaggeration. She said she'd seen enough real tragedy in her career that she didn't scare easily. But Floor 4 scared her. Floor 4 was the long-term care wing. Patients who had been there for weeks or months, some with dementia, some recovering from major surgeries, some, she said this quietly, who were simply waiting. You understand what she meant by that. The floor had 16 rooms, a nurse's station in the center, and a long corridor stretching in both directions. At night, it was dimly lit. The machines beeped and hummed. The occasional patient would call out in their sleep. This was all normal. This was just the floor. What was not normal was room 412. Room 412 was, at the time of these events, unoccupied. The patient who had last been in that room had passed away about 3 weeks prior, an elderly man named Mr. Greer. His death was expected, not traumatic. He'd simply declined over the course of several weeks and passed in the night. As deaths on that floor went, it was a peaceful one. After his passing, the room had been cleaned and left empty, waiting to be assigned to a new patient. Standard protocol. But Brianna kept noticing things in that room. The first time, she was doing her late-night rounds and glanced through the window in the door of 412 as she passed. The room was dark, as expected. But the television, which should have been off, which should have been completely off in an empty room, had a faint glow to it. Not the bright glow of a TV that was on, more like the kind of glow you get when a screen has recently been turned off, a residual warmth. She noted it and moved on, probably a power issue. She mentioned it to maintenance the next morning. Maintenance found nothing wrong. The TV was off, the room was empty. They checked the electrical and left. 2 nights later, she walked past 412 and the door was open. She was certain that she had closed it during her previous round. She was thorough about that. Doors on the long-term care floor stayed closed unless she had a reason to open them. She pushed the door fully open and looked inside. The bed had been adjusted. The head of the bed was elevated, as though someone had raised it to a sitting position. The sheets were slightly disturbed, not dramatically, not like someone had slept in them, but subtly, like someone had sat on the edge. She got another nurse, a woman named Denise, and they checked the room together. Nothing under the bed, nothing in the bathroom, nothing in the closet. They lowered the bed back to flat, straightened the sheets, and left. Brianna made sure the door was firmly closed. When she passed the room an hour later, the door was open again. After that, Brianna began paying very close attention to room 412. She would check it on every round. And over the following 2 weeks, she documented what she found. The television glow, the bed position changing, the door opening. Once, a water glass appeared on the bedside table, a glass that hadn't been there before and had no business being there. She also started noticing something else, something she was reluctant to talk about. She said that sometimes, when she was doing her rounds in the very early morning hours, around 3 or 4 a.m., she would walk past the closed door of 412 and hear something from inside. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing, the kind a sleeping person makes. She would open the door. The room would be empty. She brought this to the floor supervisor, who did not dismiss her, but also did not have an explanation. The room remained unoccupied. Brianna was told that if it continued, they would document it and involve the facility manager. It did continue. The last incident happened about 6 weeks after Mr. Greer's death. Brianna was passing 412 on her 2 a.m. round when she heard something different from inside. Not breathing. She stopped and listened. Someone was talking, a low, murmuring voice, too quiet to make out words. She stood outside the door for a full 30 seconds listening. The murmuring continued. She pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was flat. The TV was dark. But the television, and she made a point of this, made very sure of this, the television had a smear on the screen, a fresh smear, like a finger had been dragged across the glass from left to right. She had checked the room 2 hours earlier. The TV screen had been clean. Room 412 was never reassigned during the remainder of Brianna's time at that hospital. She transferred to a different floor 3 months later and requested never to be assigned to floor 4 again. She never found out who or what had been in that room.
Story 4. Dead Air. This is the story of a man named Owen who worked the overnight shift at a small FM radio station in a rural county in Georgia. It was a one-person operation. He ran the board, queued up the pre-recorded segments, took occasional calls from insomniacs and truck drivers who wanted to hear a specific song. Quiet work, mostly just Owen, the microphone, and the long, dark hours. The station was in a standalone building at the edge of town, surrounded by pine trees. The nearest neighbor was a gas station a quarter-mile up the road that closed at midnight. After that, Owen was as alone as a person could be. He'd been working there for about 8 months when the calls started. The station had a standard call-in line for listener requests. The number was printed on the station's website. Anyone could call. Usually, Owen got a handful of calls per night. Someone wanting to hear a country song, someone requesting a weather update, the occasional wrong number. The first unusual call came on a Wednesday night in early March. Owen answered it the way he always did, gave the station name and his on-air name, waited for the caller to respond. Silence. Not dead silence. He could tell the line was open, could hear the faint carrier tone, could sense someone on the other end, but no words. "Hello?" Owen said. More silence. Then, very faintly, he heard something. It wasn't words. It was more like a sound, a single sustained note, almost like humming, but not quite. It raised every hair on his arms. He disconnected the call, figured it was a bad connection, or a kid playing around. The same number called back 11 minutes later. Owen almost didn't answer, but it was a slow night and he picked up. Same thing. Silence. Then that sound, that low, droning tone. He disconnected again and put the number on a blocked list. 3 nights later, a different number called. Unknown. Owen answered. This time there were words. Not many, just a voice, and he described it as sounding flat, like someone speaking without any emotion whatsoever, almost mechanical. And the voice said, "You shouldn't be here at this hour." Then the line went dead. Owen sat at his board for a long time after that. He told himself it was a prank. Teenagers, someone who knew he worked nights and thought it would be funny to mess with him. He tried to move past it, but the calls kept coming. Different numbers, always in the deep hours of the night, between 2 and 4 a.m., always the same voice, and always something similar. Short statements, quietly menacing, delivered in that flat, empty tone. "I know what you play on Thursdays. I drove past tonight. Your light was on. You left the back door unlocked on Monday." That last one, that one broke him, because the back door to the station had been unlocked on Monday. Owen had forgotten to lock it. He'd realized it around 3 in the morning and gone back to secure it. He hadn't told anyone. He called the police. They took a report but said there wasn't much they could do about phone calls. They suggested he change his number, maybe get a camera for the exterior of the building. Owen got the camera. He also started parking his car directly under the exterior light. He became hyper-aware of every sound the building made at night. For 2 weeks, the calls stopped. He started to relax. Then, on a Tuesday night in April, the camera picked something up. He'd been reviewing the footage the next morning. He'd made a habit of checking it, and at 3:17 a.m., the parking lot camera, showed something at the edge of the frame, at the very boundary of where the light reached the darkness of the tree line. A figure, standing completely still, facing the building. Owen froze the frame and stared at it. It was impossible to make out details, just a shape, a human-shaped silhouette, standing in the darkness at the edge of the trees, perfectly still, for exactly the amount of time that the camera's motion sensor had captured, 11 seconds, before the sensor reset. When the camera captured the next motion-triggered clip, 4 minutes later, the figure was gone. Owen contacted the police again and showed them the footage. They came out, walked the tree line, and found nothing. No footprints, no evidence that anyone had been standing there. Owen gave his 2 weeks' notice the following day. He moved to a different city. He works days now. He hasn't worked a night shift since. But he told me that sometimes, late at night, when his phone rings from an unknown number, he doesn't answer it. He sits there and watches it ring, and he says he can physically feel, that flat, empty presence on the other end of the line, waiting.
Story 5. The Warehouse on Kellner Road. This one took me a while to get out of the person who lived it. His name is Danny, and he was 22 when he took a warehouse job to put himself through community college, 3rd shift, midnight to 8 a.m. The warehouse handled furniture distribution.
big, cavernous building full of wrapped pallets and floor-to-ceiling shelving units. He worked with a crew of about 6 people on his shift. The warehouse on Kellner Road had a reputation, apparently. Among the workers who'd been there a while, it was understood that you didn't walk the far northeast corner of the warehouse alone. Danny heard this on his first night, delivered as a throwaway comment by one of the more senior guys, a man named Hector. Danny asked why. Hector just shrugged and said, "You'll figure it out." Danny was not the type to take that kind of thing seriously. He was practical, skeptical, not particularly imaginative. He filed it under workplace superstition and moved on. About 3 weeks in, he was doing an inventory count in section NE7, which was, he realized, right in that northeast corner, when he noticed a smell. "It's hard to describe the smell," he said. "Not rot, exactly. Not anything organic. More like a mineral smell, heavy and cold, like wet concrete that's been sealed over and hasn't breathed in decades. It was strongest near the base of shelving unit NE7C, a massive steel rack that went all the way to the ceiling. He mentioned it to Hector the next day. Hector's expression changed in a way that Danny couldn't quite interpret. "Don't stand near that rack," Hector told him. "Just don't." This, obviously, made Danny want to understand what was going on even more. He started quietly investigating, talking to some of the older workers, doing some searching online about the building's history. What he found wasn't spectacular or dramatic. No murder, no tragedy he could confirm. But what he did find out was that the building had been constructed on land that had previously been used as a county-contracted burial site in the early 1900s. Not a cemetery in any formal sense, more of an unmarked lot used for indigent burials, the kind of thing that got quietly discontinued and quietly forgotten. The city had certified the land as clear before construction, but the construction crew, according to a local newspaper article Danny found from 1987, had encountered what one worker described as unexpected remnants during the pouring of the foundation in the northeast section of the building. The article was vague on details. The project had continued. Danny didn't share this with anyone at work. He wasn't sure how to bring it up. But shortly after he found the article, the experiences escalated. He was alone in section NE for an inventory check. His shift lead had assigned him solo to the area, which he later found out was unusual, that normally they sent people in pairs, when he heard something from above, from the top of shelving unit NE7C. A shifting sound, like weight redistributing, like something adjusting itself on top of the rack 16 feet above the warehouse floor. He looked up. He couldn't see anything. The top of the rack was in shadow, the overhead lights not quite reaching. He stood very still and listened. The shifting sound again, slow, deliberate. He left the section immediately and didn't go back alone. But the thing that Danny remembers most, the thing that he says he will carry with him for the rest of his life, happened about a month later. He was pulling a late inventory run at the end of his shift, and he made a wrong turn with his electric pallet jack by accident, ending up in section NE by accident. He was turning around to leave when he saw them. Down at the base of shelving unit NE7C, pressed against the concrete floor, were handprints. Not one or two, many. Pressed in a thin layer of dust on the floor, as though someone, or several someones, had been crawling from the direction of the wall toward the center of the warehouse. The handprints were small, too small for adults. He stared at them for a long time. Then he raised his eyes slowly and looked at the wall behind the shelving unit. At floor level, where the wall met the concrete, there was a crack. A long vertical crack, the kind old buildings develop over time. And from inside the crack, faint, almost inaudible, barely there, came the smell. That cold, mineral smell. That smell of something that had been sealed for a long time. Danny pulled out his phone and took photos. He went straight to his shift lead and showed them. The shift lead went pale. He told Danny he'd report it to management. He told Danny to go home. When Danny came back the next night, the crack had been patched, fresh sealant, same color as the wall, applied carefully, like someone had done it quickly but precisely. Nobody spoke about it. Nobody ever spoke about it. Danny lasted another 2 weeks before he found another job. He still has the photos. He's never shown them to anyone outside of a small group of people he trusts. He doesn't know what was behind that wall. He says he doesn't want to. Story 6. 3 a.m. at the Stop and Save. The last story tonight comes from a woman named Petra. She was 19 when she took a job at an all-night convenience store to help cover rent while she went to school. The store was in a mid-sized city, in a neighborhood that was, her words, not the safest but not the worst. The building had been a gas station in a previous life, and the layout still felt like one. Big glass windows on every side, a few rows of shelves, a service counter with bulletproof plexiglass. Petra worked the graveyard shift, midnight to 6, usually alone, which was fine by her. She was studying for her business classes in between customers, which were sparse, a few regulars, the occasional stranger. The stranger who changed everything showed up for the first time on a Thursday in late November. He was a tall man, middle-aged, with a gray jacket and no particular physical characteristics that stood out. He came in at exactly 3 a.m., Petra remembered because she'd just looked at the clock, and walked slowly up and down the 2 aisles without picking anything up. She watched him through the plexiglass. He came to the counter. He didn't buy anything. He just looked at her through the scratched plastic and said, "You work here alone?" Petra said yes before she could stop herself. The man nodded slowly. He looked around the store. Then he said, "That's not smart," and walked out. She watched his car leave the parking lot. She couldn't see the plates. The angle was wrong. The lighting was bad. She told herself it was nothing, a weird guy. The city had plenty of weird guys. She called her manager anyway, who told her to keep the door locked and only open for customers who buzzed the intercom, standard protocol she'd been slacking on. The following Thursday, at exactly 3 a.m., the man came back. Same gray jacket, same slow walk up and down the aisles. He came to the counter again. This time he said, "You remembered to lock the door." He smiled, then he left. Petra's hands were shaking when she called her manager. Her manager took it more seriously this time and filed a report with the store's corporate security team. They reviewed the camera footage. They confirmed the man had been there on both nights, but the cameras hadn't captured his plates, and his face was too obscured for an ID. Security told Petra to call 911 immediately if he came back. He came back the following Thursday, 3 a.m. This time he didn't come inside. He stood in the parking lot under the fluorescent lights and looked at the store. He stood there for exactly 4 minutes. Petra timed it, watching the clock, watching him, phone in her hand ready to dial. He looked at the building the way you look at a problem you're working out. Calm, patient. Then he got in his car and drove away. Petra called 911. Officers came and checked the area. Nothing. For 2 Thursdays after that, he didn't show up. Petra almost started to feel normal again. Then he came back, and this time something was different. He pulled into the parking lot at 3 a.m. as always, but instead of coming in or standing outside, he parked his car at the far edge of the lot, at the edge of the light, and turned his headlights off. And he sat there. Petra watched him through the glass. He didn't get out. He didn't move. He just sat in his dark car and watched the store. She called 911. While she was on the phone with the dispatcher describing the situation, the car's interior light briefly clicked on as he opened the door. Just for a second, just enough for her to see him clearly for the first time. He was looking directly at her, and he was holding up something small and flat, pressing it against his car window toward her. It was a photograph. She couldn't see what was in the photograph from that distance, but he held it there, pointed at her for a long moment. Then he got out of the car and began walking toward the store. The police arrived in under 4 minutes. By the time they pulled into the lot, the man was gone. His car was still parked at the edge of the lot. They ran the plates. The car had been reported stolen 3 weeks earlier from a county 2 states away. Petra quit that night. She never went back.
The police followed up, but the man was never identified. She doesn't know what was in that photograph. She has theories, but she says she's glad she never found out for certain. She works days now. She leaves before the sun goes down, and she makes a point of it. Every Thursday at 3 a.m., she says she can't sleep. She lies there in the dark, and she thinks about that photograph pressed against a car window, pointed directly at her. She doesn't know why he chose her. She's just grateful he stopped. At least, she thinks he stopped. 6 people, 6 nights they'll never fully let go of. And the thing that gets me, the thing that I keep coming back to when I think about these stories, is how ordinary it all started. A job, a clock-in, an empty building, a quiet night, a routine they'd done 100 times before. And then something shifted. That's the thing about the dark. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come in dramatic, obvious ways. It creeps. It settles in at the edges, in the sounds that don't quite fit, in the things that are slightly wrong, in the feeling you get when you just know that something in the room has changed. These people trusted their instincts, eventually. Maybe that's the takeaway. Maybe the scariest thing isn't what's in the dark. Maybe it's how long we stand there telling ourselves it's nothing. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And if you're heading into a night shift tonight, keep the lights on.